Okay, so now we're going to work on two-step equations. And so in other words, it'll require 2 steps to eliminate it. Now, anytime we have a number times a variable here plus or minus a number, the easiest way to solve this is to first eliminate the number that's added or subtracted to the variable. So since this is 2x plus 7, I know I can cancel the 7 by simply subtracting 7 from both sides, like I did in the earlier problem. Now that doesn't give me the answer. What that gives me, when I subtract 7 from this side, it cancels the 7, and it leaves me with 2x. And then on the right hand side, remember, since I subtracted 7 on the left of the equal, I have to subtract 7 on the right. And so that's going to leave me with 9 minus 7, which is 2. Okay, so now the next step, I want to figure out how to eliminate this 2 that's multiplied by the x. Well, since this is 2 times x, remember earlier we learned that you can get the 2 to cancel, because if you divide this by 2, then we get 2 over 2, which is 1. And so that just leaves me with 1x. So I need to divide the left side by 2. And if I divide the left side by 2, then I also have to divide this right side by 2. So if I divide 2 by 2, I get 1. So my answer there is x equal 1. So that's the 2 steps. The first step was to subtract 7 from both sides. The second step was to divide both sides by 2. Okay, so now if you look at this problem, it requires 2 steps. The first thing I'm going to have to do is add 5 to both sides to eliminate the negative 5. So if I add 5 to the left side, that will cancel the minus 5. And then if I add 5 to the right side, negative 25 plus 5 will give me negative 20. So since the 5 canceled over here, I'm just going to have 5a on the left, and on the right side, I'm going to have the negative 20. Now, I want to get a by itself, so since a is multiplied by 5, the way to counteract that is to divide both sides by 5. So if I divide 5a by 5, then 5 over 5 is 1, so I just get 1a, which is just a. And then since I divided the left side by 5, to keep things balanced, I have to divide the right side by 5. So negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. So in this example, a is equal to negative 4. Okay, now here I have 7 minus 2m equals negative 11. Well, I can still subtract 7 from both sides to get rid of the 7. So if I subtract 7 here, so I'm going to take the 7 away from the left side, so I'll have 7 minus 7. Now I could put the minus 7 over here beside the 2m, but I think it makes more sense to put it just to the right of the 7. That way I can see that 7 minus 7 is going to cancel, but I still have a negative 2m on the left. So I have negative 2m on the left. Now remember, since I subtracted 7 from the left, I have to subtract 7 from the right, so I get negative 11 minus 7, which is negative 18. And then you have negative 2m equals negative 18. And then to isolate the m, I can divide both sides by negative 2. Because if I divide negative 2m by negative 2, the negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. So I just get 1m, which is m. And then on the right hand side, I have to also divide by negative 2. So I have negative 18 divided by negative 2, which is a positive 9. Because remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Okay, so we're just going to continue working some more problems like this. Here, to solve this, let's think ahead. What 2 steps would I need to do here? I would have to add 1 to both sides to get rid of the minus 1, and then I'd have to divide both sides by 3. So let's do that. Let's add 1 to both sides. So I add 1 here and I add 1 here, so that way the 1's cancel. And then I have negative 52 plus 1 equals negative 51. So bring down the 3p and then the negative 51. And now the second step is to divide both sides by 3. So divide 3p by 3. That way 3 over 3 is 1. So I have 1p, or p. And then divide negative 51 by 3. And 3 goes into negative 51 negative 17 times. Because a negative divided by a positive is negative. Okay, now here, in order to solve this one, the two steps would be what? I'd add 4 to both sides to get rid of the negative 4. And then, since the 5 is in the denominator, I'd have to multiply both sides by 5. So, first of all, add the 4 to both sides. So add 4 to both sides. And then, of course, negative 4 plus 4 cancels. And on the left side, just leaves me with x over 5 right here. And then on the right-hand side, 12 plus 4 is 16. So now, in order to get rid of this 5, I've got to multiply this by 5 so that 5 over 5 becomes 1, and I just get 1x on the left. And then since I multiplied the left by 5, I must also multiply the right by 5. So 5 times 16 is 80. Okay. Okay, so here's another one. I need to subtract 3 from both sides to get rid of the 3. And then this time the denominator is 5 again, but notice I have a negative fraction. So the two steps I'm going to have to do here is to subtract 3 from both sides, then multiply both sides by negative 5. So let's subtract 3 from both sides, and that way it'll cancel the positive 3. And then negative 8 minus 3, you have to do that on the left, subtract 3 from negative 8, and negative 8 minus 3 is negative 11. So all I have left on the left is the negative t over 5. Now remember, since this is a negative, multiplying by 5 won't get the trick done because it would still leave me with a negative. So I actually need to multiply by negative 5 over here. And now I know that negative 5 times a negative is positive, and since the 5's cancel, I get a positive t. And then on the right-hand side, since I multiplied the left by negative 5, I've got to multiply the right-hand side by negative 5. And negative 5 times negative 11 is positive 55. Okay, so just a couple more here. Okay, I threw some decimals at you here. All right, so here I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So if I subtract 2 from the left, that's just going to cancel the positive 2. So I have 2 minus 2 cancels. And then that'll just leave me with the negative 3.25z. And then on the right-hand side, I'm going to subtract 2. Well, 24.75 minus 2 is 22.75. Now, since this is a negative coefficient of z, negative 3.25, I actually want to divide by a negative 3.25 so that, remember, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and that way I'll just have a positive z. So I know that 3.25s cancel and give me 1, but negative over negative is positive, so that's going to give me a positive 1z on the left. And then I took a calculator and did this. I took 22.75 and divided it by negative 3.25. Since I divided the left by negative 3.25, I have to divide the right by negative 3.25. So I got negative 7 for the answer when I did that division. Okay, here's another one with decimals. Notice here I'm subtracting a negative 0.5. So what I'm going to do to get rid of the negative 0.5, I'm just going to add 0.5. So if I add 0.5 to negative 0.5, the negative 0.5 plus 0.5 is 0. And then if I add 0.5 to negative 3.5, I'm actually just going to get negative 3. So on the right-hand side, I have negative 3. And on the left-hand side, I have negative x over 7. Now again, you see the 7 in the denominator, but again, I can't just multiply by 7. I have to multiply by negative 7 because this is a negative fraction, so therefore I need a negative number to turn it into a positive. So a negative times a negative is positive, and 7 over 7 is just 1, so that's going to give me positive x. And then since I multiplied the left by negative 7, I have to multiply the right by negative 7. And negative 7 times negative 3 is positive 21. All right, got one more, and then we're through with this section. So here, I want to get rid of the 11.5 first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 11.5 from both sides. So I'm going to take this side, subtract 11.5 from both sides. And that'll cancel the plus 11.5. And then 51.5 minus 11.5 on the right. Well, on the left, that's going to leave me with negative 8k. And if you do this, you can probably do this one by hand, but 51.5 minus 11.5 is actually 40. And then you want to get the k by itself, so you'll just simply divide both sides by negative 8. And so when you divide negative 8 into negative 8k, you just get 1k. And then 40 divided by negative 8 will give you negative 5. So k would be negative 5. Now on each of these, you can also cancel. You can cancel on each of these. I want to mention something that I didn't mention, but it might come in handy for you at some point. Here, there's a thing called transposing. Let me just show you. Like if I had the equation x minus 5 equals 3, you can add 5 to both sides, and that way you get x equals 3 plus 5. But another way to think of that is if you just take the minus 5 and move it across the equal sign, it changes that sign to plus 5. And so that way you would get your answer of 8. So it's just kind of another way to think of, like when you're adding the same thing to both sides, or even if you were subtracting, if this had been a plus 5, if you move the plus 5 to the other side of the equal sign, it would actually become a minus 5. So that's called transposing values, and you know, don't use it unless you feel comfortable using it. Okay, so that takes care of two-step problems. Now obviously there's going to be some equations that require more than 2 steps. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at what I call multi-step equations, or you might also call these just general linear equations.